Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. And today I will be doing something a little bit different, as I talked about in the last episode. On Thursdays now, I will be doing book reviews of horror books. Horror fiction, basically. And picked out a few short stories today, and then one novel. And we'll see how much of that we get to. This is my first time doing an episode of this where I'm actually trying to do a little more of an in-depth review. I will say that there will probably be spoilers, but it should still be fun to go over these stories and to talk about how they kind of mirror different things in the paranormal as well. So, let me just put in the chat here. I forgot to do that. But anyway. So the three short stories that I am going to talk about today are from an audiobook I recently got. And I found different versions of this book by doing searches for the title. So I'm guessing there are different editions and maybe even different, I'm not sure. But I put the link in the chat earlier, and it is the complete H.P. Lovecraft, The Complete Fiction by H.P. Lovecraft. And started listening to it recently, and I re-listened to the first three stories again today. So the first one is called The Nameless City, and it talks about a man. Never really says for sure what his job is or what he does. For if this is a job that he does or if it's something he just does for out of curiosity. But you find him in exploring these temples out in a desert. I believe he mentions Arabia. I'm not sure what exactly. They don't really go any deeper than that as far as location. But so this man goes into the desert to explore these temples that no one else will explore, and starts finding just odd-shaped buildings that seem to be designed maybe not necessarily for humans, or at least not regular size humans, as in maybe small. Which is kind of funny because usually if you hear that, you'd think the other way around. You'd think maybe giants, but not the case here. And as he's doing this, he notices a wind coming from a certain area, and it turns out it's coming from another temple. And so he goes to investigate that. Actually, in the story, it says he basically traces the wind, follows it to the source of this temple, and he goes in, and of course it's kind of it's a temple and it's older, so everything is there's a lot of sand everywhere. And so as he's going through, he's finding basically first thing he finds, I believe, are some cases that appear to have mummies in them, but they don't appear to be human. He doesn't even think they're real at first, because they appear to be more reptilian in nature. Not giant, but again, just smaller, but still there. And then he starts seeing paintings or pictures along the walls. I don't know if it was paintings. Might have been some kind, but art along the walls. depicting these same beings. And the thing that's interesting as he's going through this place, and it's really actually wearing him out. He's kind of getting more and more worn out because he's been exploring for apparently hours, I guess, and doesn't seem to have much in the way of supplies. Um, but one thing he notices about all these pictures, or these and this one of these carvings and everything, is there's no reference to death, any kind of natural death among the beings that apparently made the city, other than when it involves battles and wars with what appear to be, I think, and I'm just doing this kind of still new to this, so I could be wrong, but basically battles and wars with people, ancient people. And so he's going through this temple, and every so often this wind or this breeze comes through it. So he's still tracing the source of this wind. And it's kind of funny as my heater turns on. But anyway, so he's getting more worn out. Eventually his torch goes out, but then there's this other light that comes from deeper within this temple. And eventually he ends up getting so exhausted, apparently, where he's almost crawling through this temple. Which is kind of okay because everything is... There's not always room to stand up straight anyway, apparently. And so he crawls through, and he eventually finds this door, metal door, bronze door, I believe it says. And there's an opening. It's a doorway, but it's actually almost as tall as a regular person at that point. And there's a light coming from it, but it's like a mist light kind of thing. And the air is coming from this area, the wind. And he stops because he sees that there's steps leading down further. But he can't even see how far down they go because of this strange light mist kind of thing. That is almost like the color of the sun. And he's exhausted, so he stops there. And then he's debating on whether or not to go down. And then this wind starts to pick up again. And he basically can't move from this space in front of this door. Because it's basically blowing so hard that he couldn't even get up if he wanted to. And along with this wind, he's sensing almost what you could call spirits or ghosts or non-physical, basically beings without any kind of a physical body. And it's basically starts to get really, really afraid. It really frightens him. And so eventually he's hearing voices in this wind, but they're not human voices. But they don't seem to be happy either. And they seem almost, again, reptilian. And the story ends with him basically somehow escaping. He doesn't even know how he escaped. And talking about how he'll never forget that, and how at night, when a regular wind blows, it makes him think of this strange kind of almost like a ghost wind kind of thing, which is really odd. So that's basically that story. Again, that's just a very general description. But the imagery of all the art in the walls, of course, it's done a lot better in the story in terms of description than I was able to do here. But the idea of that wind containing spirits or containing beings, entities, is really interesting. Because if you kind of think about it, that's if they're not made of solid matter, then maybe the wind would be the easiest way for things like that to travel, although it's still confusing because if they're not physical, then how exactly are they traveling through it? But it's still really interesting. There are times when I get weird feelings when it gets windy outside, and I wonder if it's just because it's making the building kind of creak and groan, or if it's something else. So I thought that was a interesting story, and there's a lot of things in other stories, not so much in this one, but where apparently Lovecraft did not have the some of the best views of other peoples and other areas, other cultures, and it kind of seeped through some of his stories. Not so much that one, but in later ones in the book. So I always kind of look at it as I'm okay with ignoring that kind of stuff in books. If I can find other interesting things that seem to be references to more paranormal stuff that happens in real life, and that's kind of why I'm being drawn to this book, is because there's so much in his writing that seems like it was inspired, and again, there's a show about this that I recently listened to, well, a little while back now, actually. But if you're interested in more of this, I would definitely recommend, and I didn't think to pull up the link to it, but if you go to troubleminds.org and do a search for H.P. Lovecraft or Lovecraft, you'll find an episode about that. That friends of the show, Mike and Derek, the Night Stalker, did. It was a very good show, and kind of inspired me to they and others inspired me to start looking into Lovecraft and his writing, and the way possibly his nightmares could have led to his writing, which then leads to where does all that come from? Is it possible that there was some other being or beings that were influencing those dreams, those nightmares, and leading him to write all these stories? So, APOC says, it reminds me of a dream I had about time and invisible inhabitants. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, that's the first story in that book. At least the version I got. I've heard that you can find a lot of Lovecraft stuff on YouTube, which is good. But the thing is, this book that I found, this audiobook, it's almost like 2 days long. It has so much audio. It's like 47 hours and so many minutes long. And so it's a collection of all of this stuff in one file. And it was only like $5 on the Google Play Store that I use to get audiobooks now. So I didn't feel too bad about getting that one, because that's just a lot of content. That's a ton for that price, really. So, but yeah, so that's that first story. The next story, I'm just trying to remember here. I may have to actually open the file. I'll have to go find it again. Oh, it was the festival. And that one was an interesting one too, because it again dealt with going underground, because that's where this That's where a lot of that first story happened. Is underground. So, in this story, there's this man that comes back to his basically a town where his family, but like basically ancestors lived for a uh, yearly, for a ritual that the family does. And it's really interesting because he says in the story he was summoned to be there for this ritual. He doesn't really ever say how or why or much about any of that. Um, so he goes to this town, and when he gets there, he notices it's all quiet, even though there's supposed to be this festival that is associated with this ritual or this ceremony. And so it's confusing to him because it seems like most of the town is just really quiet. The buildings look like they're all really old, really maybe even falling apart in some places. But he goes to the house. Apparently, someone, I don't know, either he read about it or it was written to him. Someone wrote to him. Not sure about that. But goes to this house, and this older man opens the door, lets him in, and but he never really says anything except in a language I believe that the narrator doesn't really understand. That's what it was. He writes things. He writes words down in English, pad or something, or I forget now what it was. But communication is not in the ideal way that you would normally have it. So, the narrator, excuse me, is in this house, and it starts getting late, and he's wondering when the ceremony is going to begin, or this ritual is going to begin. And eventually, it starts to get dark, and that's when he's reading a book that appears apparently. It's mentioned in a lot of Lovecraft stories, and I'm not sure if there's a reason for that yet. I haven't gotten through the whole book yet. But it's a book that is known as the Necronomicon. And so he so finally this older couple that he meets in this house, they basically lead him out of the house and towards this church, and more and more people start showing up, but everyone is wearing almost like like hooded cloaks, and so everyone looks strange to the narrator, and so they all start heading towards this church. And the narrator doesn't like it. He doesn't like the way the town looks. He doesn't like the feeling he's getting from his physical surroundings and the people. So he ends up delaying, even though the man that he met first is trying to urge him into the church. He waits. He kind of holds back and waits until everyone else has entered. And so they enter this church, and then, but instead of staying in the church part, there's this hole, or this opening in the floor of this church that leads down. Again, like I said, leading underground, and turns out it's basically an underground crypt area kind of thing. Underground crypt burial ground kind of area. But there's also, it's almost like a natural, at some point it's more like a natural cave, because there's a river, underground river in this cave. And I'm not sure at this point if the there is a fire. It sounds like there's like a shaft that has this light or fire coming out of it. But the other thing that is interesting in the story is this whole time, no one makes any sound. Excuse me. And there's no sound of the people walking. When they're walking down the stairs, when they're there's basically, it's like everything is. It's almost like in a way, it's almost like a dream in that respect. But so and then the ceremony begins, this ritual, and this ominous feeling gets just heavier and heavier, or stronger and stronger, and the narrator is watching the ceremony. I don't remember all the exact details, and it's not super important, but he doesn't like this this opening, or this place where this light's coming out, and eventually he gets so frightened that he jumps into this river, even though he doesn't even like the look of the water in this river, and then eventually he loses consciousness. This one and the last one are kind of similar in different ways, and he wakes up in a hospital in that same town. And when he looks around, when he's able to get up and look around, everything is different. It's more modern, for at least for that time, where there's vehicles driving down the road, and there's public transportation and all those kind of things. But apparently he is found in the river by people in this town and rescued, and he recovers in the hospital. He ends up getting sent to another hospital. But he asks about getting a copy, of this book that he read, this Necronomicon. This book that he read part of while he was waiting for the ceremony to begin, and through a local library, a copy is found, and he realizes that whatever happened, it was real, because he reads a section while he's in the hospital that he remembers reading while he was in that house. So, again, that's just a really interesting story. That basically ends not long after that. Is that like a time slip, or did he go to another dimension? Or I have no idea what to really call that. So, but and I don't think it was just a dream, because he remembers reading a certain passage from this book. So it's a really odd story because of these things. In the way there was no sound. It's almost like everyone there, including him, because he didn't make any sound that he could tell either. It's almost like they were all ghosts in a way, or not physically there. Even though the narrator did feel the old man trying to pull him into the church, so there was some sense of touch, but that seems to be about it. So yeah, really odd, really interesting story there. And again, just I kind of sensed what was happening as I was reading it. It seemed like something to do with not being in the regular time or space somehow. And I was wondering how that was going to end, so it was really interesting. With it, and so yeah, I like that story. That was an interesting one. So let's see here. We'll go on to the third story, and yeah, the Cal says the river Styx Great story. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It's just so many questions. That raises so many questions. So, really good story. But the next one that I listened to, and I listened to these all again today. So um, the next story in this book was A Color Out of Space, and this was this actually got me thinking about the Stephen King novel that I'm going to mention after this, because there were a couple interesting kind of similarities to them. Um, so the story starts out with a meteor crashing into the yard of, I believe it was a farmer, but it was someone out in the country, basically. And, um, but when people go to look at it, it has these strange physical properties where they're able to break off a piece of it to have sent to a lab to examine it. But it barely starts to cool down, first of all. Even hours and days later, it seems. But it's also, it reacts to the air around it and any materials that it touches. To the point where, even as scientists are introducing or putting different chemicals on it and around it, different things, tests on it, it doesn't. It's basically slowly deteriorating, and eventually the sample that they take just basically disappears based on this reaction it has to everything around it. And so they go back after that to get another sample. And meanwhile, this was over the course of days. So it was a farmer, because this farmer's crops start to grow extremely well. And there's a lot of them, and they seem to be kind of bigger, which is really interesting. But then the farmer notices that when they harvest them and they go to eat them, none of them taste good. They're not edible. And so meanwhile, a second sample is taken of this thing, a larger one. Also, they find this almost like a gel or a plastic-like orb in the middle of this thing, and someone decides to try to get into it, or to tap it with a hammer or something to see what happens, and it basically pops and starts to deteriorate but faster than the rest of the rock or stone did. So, but they managed to get their second sample, and it's bigger, but it still has those same. Basically, they cannot categorize it. They can't say or determine what it is. It's something that just does not. They have no knowledge of at all. And so they do more tests. And again, this other sample, same as the first one, takes longer because it's a bigger sample. But eventually, it's gone. Meanwhile, the family that lives in this property, start noticing that they're not feeling good physically or mentally. They're also noticing that their animals are also going through, basically having problems. Their livestock, and when they once they go and slaughter one of the animals to use for meat, the meat isn't good. And it's the same way with the vegetables that are there. But apparently the story says that the livestock was not fed or the livestock was not given the vegetables that were growing on the property. But of course they were given the water. So the family and their livestock start deteriorating mentally and physically. And there's also the strange light that is appearing at night around the property and near the well. And so I'm kind of, there's so much that happens in the story. But eventually the family ends up dying for the most part. I believe the whole family does. But then the people that go are trying to figure out what's going on, they go back there one day as the last member is basically fading, and it ends up getting to be night again, and some kind of a strange light again, and a presence starts gathering, and then basically shoots back up and off into space. And so no one can figure out what they saw. The animals that they used to get there were freaking out, and they were basically there's this weird kind of poison that was affecting everyone and everything there. And the narrator in the story in the end says they don't think that whatever flew off into space was alone. They think that there was still something left of whatever that was in that meteor, and it has gotten into the well, into the water, and still there, and maybe even more of them. And because even after the primary story basically ends, the area is still strange. No one wants to stay there, and none of the flowers and the plants in the surrounding area, there mentions that they don't quite look right. So the idea is that whatever this is, it's slowly, possibly just very slowly spreading, and taking in all the nutrients and the energy of its surroundings, and that's how that story basically ends. It's really interesting idea of alien life, or some kind of alien something that landed and spread and then still stayed, but also still flew back off into space. So that was a creepy one in that way. It's like that's some interesting. That's like sci-fi horror right there if you think about it. So and that got me thinking of. So those of you that know me, you'll know that I'm a pretty big Stephen King fan. I don't like all of his books, but I like a lot of them. Excuse me. And this got me thinking of the book of his, the Tommyknockers. Because, well, I guess you'll see why here. But just checking here. Okay, good. Looks like everything's going good with the recording so far. So the Tommyknockers is a novel, so it's going to be even harder to really summarize this, because it's hard enough doing that with the short story. But it starts off with this writer that has a house that borders some woods, and they use some of the wood for heating in their home. And so there's this one day they were basically walking through and marking trees that they were going to use later. And it's this, I guess it'd be a middle-aged woman, maybe. Um, and as she's walking through this forest with her dog, she literally stumbles over something sticking up out of the ground. And when she gets back up and looks at it, it's metal. And so she starts to dig at it a little bit, thinking it'll just be a plate or maybe a can or tool or something. But it doesn't end. When she's dug for a while, it doesn't end. I forget all the measurements and all that stuff that go with it. But so she decides that eventually she may dig it up, look into it more. So she goes back home with her dog, who is also aging, and so it's not doing so well. But after she finds the ship. Oh, there's sirens back behind me. But anyway, we'll see if that comes through. But once she gets back to her house with the dog, she starts noticing that the dog seems to be getting better. And not only that, almost like he's getting younger. He had a cataract over one eye, and it basically appears to start shrinking. And she even took the dog to a vet, the local vet. And once she got there, at one point, all the animals in the vet, as the vet is examining the dog, I believe, all the animals in that vet just go crazy, like they're reacting to something. And so the vet finishes the exam, and basically, her name is Bobby. Bobby gets her dog and leaves there as fast as she can. She doesn't even get to pay for the visit because all the animals there, even the ones in the back that can't even see the anything going on in the front. Basically, every animal in this place is reacting, basically freaking out over something that no one can figure out. So, and then one night when there's a storm, Bobby notices, I can't remember if this is before or after, but notices as she's holding the dog, she sees this spot of green light on the wall across from where she's sitting with the dog. And she looks at the dog's face, and the spot on the wall goes away. And she realizes there's some kind of a strange green light coming from the dog's eye. Also, it happens to be the one that has the cataract on it. So, anyway, she starts digging up whatever this is. And meanwhile, she has a friend. His last name is Gardner, and that's kind of the story. As with a lot of Stephen King stories, there's a lot of characters in the book, but a good part of the book focuses on these two. This friend of Bobby's, who's a poet, also dealing with basically alcoholism, and this one day, not long after the beginning of this book with Bobby, he starts getting this thought in his head that won't go away, and he starts thinking of Bobby, and he keeps feeling like the book even says this thought is basically Bobby's in trouble, and he tries to ignore it for a while, and he's still dealing with all just what he's going through, and eventually, after he basically crashes or ruins this party one night and falls asleep out on a beach. Apparently, he basically blacks out there. He decides to go check on her, and he gets there, and she's she's not doing well. She's basically lost a bunch of weight since he's last seen her. And she doesn't hardly makes any sense when she's talking. And he's trying to figure out what's going on, and that's when she mentions that she's been really busy digging up whatever this is in the ground. And around the same time, different people in this small town of Haven, in the story, start having these bursts of ideas about how to make things that they could use, make devices they could use. And so the story kind of follows all of this. And eventually it turns out that the thing in the ground is basically almost like a flying saucer kind of deal. I don't remember if it was saucer shape. I believe it was. And but eventually, digging up the ship takes so much out of Bobby that she can't go on. So the town starts sending one person at a time to go help with the unearthing of this giant ship. And things start getting stranger. People start getting into more and more arguments, and there's also this kind of telepathy going on, getting stronger and stronger among all the people in this town. But it's something that Jim does not share, because he had an injury, a head injury, years before this, and to save his life, there was a surgeons put a metal plate in his head, and but he's noticing this telepathy going on, and he feels like Bobby and then others are trying to get into his mind to figure out what he's going to do once the ship is unearthed. If he's going to tell the rest of the world what's going on or not. And that's basically the start of this whole book. I won't. This time I can kind of step away and not give away the ending so much. But it's a very interesting book. It's just really, there's so many characters in it, and they all have their own different stories and within the book, and it's just really, I really like that book. I guess you could probably tell by now. And so yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today. But I just really thought, I guess I didn't say, I really thought it was interesting that there were a couple of little similarities in that a color out of space, and then the Tommyknockers. In that, one of the other things I forgot to mention in this book is Bobby had a garden, and as soon as this ship starts being unearthed, all the plants in her garden start growing really well, and but then when they go to eat any of the vegetables, they don't taste good. So, but yeah. Anyway, like I said, I think that'll do it for today. Hope you all enjoyed this. This is kind of my first time trying to do an actual book review show, but I'm gonna do this again every Thursday, I believe. It may be more short stories for a while until I probably short stories from that book that I got, that H.P. Lovecraft, The Complete Fiction, because I'm gonna keep listening to that, and so yeah, we'll go from there. Tomorrow night I will be continuing with a look at haunted cemeteries and graveyards. The last time I did a show on that, I never I only used one of the articles that I found. I have 3 that I found, so we'll continue that tomorrow night, and then Saturday will be the 100th episode, the call-in show. I'm calling it basically a call-in show, and that'll be that for the week. So, thank you all for being here and listening, whether it's to the live stream or the podcast feed or the YouTube videos. I appreciate all of it. So, but yeah, thank you all, and have a good night, and I'll talk to you all on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal.